Hello again, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café. A few tech issues today, but we're going to get going. I'm volunteer Rick McNamer. Every Sunday from 3 to 4, your host, Ray Gary, and I put together a panel of guests to discuss topics of interest in our community. Listeners can participate by texting in questions or comments to 541-661-4098. Again, that's 541-661-4098. And since we're a little late, we're going to get going here. So, Ray, you can tell us about what's going on today. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, as far as what's going on, our main engineer is out sick, and we're kind of fuddling through trying to make all the connections between here and Washington or wherever we're talking to. And we have one guest here in the studio, and I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, and then he can introduce our next guest.
Sounds great.
Take it away.
Take it away, Brett.
You're on.
Thanks for having me in the studio today. I'm Brett Cecil from Port Orford. I also just by chance happen to be running for House District 1 in our Oregon State House currently. And we are here so that we can speak with our U.S. representative, Val Hoyle. And she's on the line to visit with us now. So, Rick, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Okay, Congresswoman Val Hoyle, thank you for joining us. And if you would kind of come on in and tell us about yourself and what all the stuff we're going to talk about today.
So first of all, thank you for having me on your show, especially with Brett. He's a longtime good friend. And I am in D.C. There's a lot going on.
Oh, man.
We hope so.
Yeah, that's an understatement. It's hard to even know where to start. But we're trying to make sure that we're both doing the job of serving the community while standing up and speaking out for the best interests of the people in the 4th Congressional District. Most of my colleagues come from places that are all red or all blue, and that is not the 4th Congressional District. It goes from Lincoln County, it's all of Benton County, Lane County, half of Douglas from the coast through Roseburg, all of Coos and all of Curry County. So, if the large district is politically diverse, there are 4 native tribes in the district and a third of the members of 2 other tribes as well. So working with tribal nations is a big part of what we do. But, I just try and focus on being practical. And right now, what I see is that we're spending $2 billion a day in a foreign war with no plan for an end, putting Americans in danger. And that is my biggest concern right now. I mean, we're blowing our deficit up. And again, Congress has the constitutional authority to declare war. And I will tell you that the junior people at Fox News knew that we were going to go and attack Iran before I, as a member of Congress, knew. And that's wrong. The week that we went into Iraq, Mike Johnson canceled the Foreign Affairs and Homeland Security Committee hearings. I don't know why my colleagues want to give away the power that the Constitution gave to Congress, but this is what I'm here trying to fight for.
Well, and thank you. That was one of my big questions. And I'm going to give just a tiny disclaimer about me. I happen to be the lone Californian here. I live just across the border, but I spend many, many days and hours up here at Southern Oregon.
We vetted him very carefully before we allowed him to come across.
Allowed me on the station. But and Congresswoman, you answered one of my biggest questions about that. This Iran war is not only wrong, but pretty crazy on what we're doing. And I think it's unpopular across the political realm.
Across the world.
And the world.
Wow.
Hello.
It is. Well, across the world, we are, the president is ignoring our NATO allies. I met with some Canadians this week. I have family that live in Europe, and they are, they're appalled, they're afraid. They are saying, what is your president doing? And the fact of the matter is, I did not agree when we went into Iraq, but that administration spent over a year preparing for it, uh, trying to build up a reason for going into Iraq. Again, it didn't turn out well. We lost American lives. But there was no preparation. We've used 3 years worth of missiles, right, in 2 weeks. And we're putting American lives on the line. And when we put boots on the ground, and it's, our kids that are filling those boots, I think we have to be very, very careful. And this does not seem to be well thought out. And we're putting Americans very much in danger.
Well, I'm wondering if Barron is considering putting a couple of years in the military. He'd be the first Trump to have
He
been in the
absolutely is
military.
not.
Yeah, I
Right.
was,
He is not. They're saying it's because he's 5'9".
yeah.
He
He couldn't be
it's
accepted,
not
but
Donald Trump's kids going in.
yeah.
No,
That's all I'm saying.
no. And you're so right about it is apples and well, that's the right thing to say. But to the Iraq and is Iraq and Iran. I mean, even I was way back there was kind of believing that there were weapons of mass destruction there for a while until it proved out to be not true at all. And by then the damage was done. And this thing came on like gangbusters, boy. Just like within a day we were there.
And again, we are at war, and we still have the president has not come to Congress. Now they're asking for $200 billion, right? After we blew a $4 trillion hole in the budget with the Republican budget bill last year. So $200 billion for what?
There's
So we can continue another endless war abroad? I can't vote for that.
There's an old song by Gil Scott-Heron, I don't know how many of you are familiar with, called Whitey on the Moon. And basically, he's a guy in the story living in a ghetto, and his sister just got bit by a rat. They can't pay doctor bills. Her arms and necks begin to swell, and Whitey's on the moon.
The priorities.
Exactly. Yeah, that's...
Well, no, and boy, it's just not a laughing matter. We're in a scary place, and not only, Congresswoman, you talked about how the Trump administration has alienated our allies and friends, and seems to prop up Putin for sure, and maybe Xi from China a little bit over all of this.
Well, and look at China is preparing to invade Taiwan.
There's a big scare.
We know that Russia is now that everyone is distracted, is going full bore in Ukraine. Our European NATO allies understand that Russia getting closer to their countries is a danger for everyone. We pulled out of USAID, and people might say, why are we spending money taking care of people in Africa or these other countries? Well, that gives us soft power, right?
I believe.
And we took that money out, and China is going in and developing those relationships with those countries. I mean, what I talk to people, business owners here in Oregon, in my district, and with the tariff they're paying for goods coming in, and we're an export dependent state, and people abroad are buying less American things. Like, let's just go to our wine industry. 40% of the wines that we sell go to Canada, and that market ended overnight because we alienated our allies. And right now, we should be spending money on making sure people have access to healthcare, on bringing manufacturing back, on economic development, on addressing the needs of the American people. We have a president that was elected, and I talked to a lot of very conservative Republicans who voted for Trump, and they said they voted for Trump because he would put America first, and they don't understand why he's blowing apart the budget and invading other countries. That was not part of what they voted for.
No, not at all. And Congresswoman, since you are on the quote inside, do you get a feeling or a sense that there's really a lot more not how I support for, I should say, non-support for what the Trump administration is doing, because it's really some
Ab-
pretty crazy stuff. But and if you do see that, why are they not speaking out more?
well, I don't know. There's some people that are. We've got, of course, Thomas Massey, right? Where I might disagree with him, but he is a man of principle, and part of that is not busting the budget. Don Bacon and a number of other Republicans have spoken up. We have Republicans that spoke up against the erratic tariff policy, and Donald Trump came in and supported their primary opponents because what he wants from Congress is for this body to be, number one, only responsive to Republican needs, and we represent almost half the population. That isn't right or fair. And number two, to be the Duma, just a checkbox institution that gives the executive branch what they want. And that is not our job. Our job as a separate and equal branch of government is to add checks and balances. It's the judiciary, the legislative branch, and the executive. And, I'm very frustrated with my colleagues, with Mike Johnson in particular, for not carrying out the duty outlined in the Constitution that they took an oath to. The other thing that I've been talking to people about is the rise in gas prices, right? We've got, the oil prices, gas prices are going through the roof. And because of the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, we're not going to see them come down anytime quick. I think the president thought that going into Iran would be like Venezuela, which, going into any sovereign countries, I'm not going to, I certainly will not speak up for Nicolas Maduro. He's a horrible, horrible dictator. But
Correct.
invading another country just because, we want to do some manifest destiny thing and thinking going into Iran, where with the kind of sophisticated tariff cells that they have, with their ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which many goods come through, and the fact that we're not getting oil, Americans are going to be paying the price. And they're already seeing it. I don't see this ending anytime soon, and that is terrifying.
It is terrifying. And I think most Americans will certainly agree Iran is a horrible situation with
Horrible.
killing their own people. I mean, and it's been that way. But boy, I did watch an interview the other day with Christiane Amanpour, who I happen to love, but it's from Iran. And like she said, there's plenty of people. There's a lot of wonderful, smart people there, but they're under such horrific leadership, and I don't even call it leadership, but it wasn't worth doing what we did. We've exacerbated that situation, I think, rather than
Oh, I
helped anything out.
I've I've spoken with a number of Iranian Americans who I've gotten to be good friends with, and I mean, the Ayatollah Khomeini, again, horrific dictator. They murdered tens of thousands of their own people. I've spoken to women who were imprisoned at 14 and 15 and watched their family members and friends get murdered. I mean, the Ayatollah Khomeini was a horrible dictator. And what needs to happen is not that the U.S. should go in, but that the people of Iran should be able to determine to overthrow that current regime. That current regime in Iran is not supported by the people. But now that we're bombing their energy plants, we're threatening to blow off everything in Iran, we're targeting civilian infrastructure, not military infrastructure, civilian infrastructure. So what are we doing? No one starts a revolution on a full stomach, and we are making the Iranian people hate us. We are putting civilians in even more danger and peril. For what? I still don't understand. They were not a direct threat to us, and there were other ways to handle this. But again, the president took a notion, listened to direction from Benjamin Netanyahu, and decided to go in to Iran. And now we're stuck in a quagmire that we were, just like we were in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. It has never turned out well for us.
And there's another elephant in the room, Benjamin Netanyahu, who many years ago I kind of thought was okay, but he's turned into a terrorist. Look what's happened in Gaza, and it's still going on. I'm wondering how much of this conversation between Trump and Netanyahu kind of try to get a distraction for what everything else is going on. Now, I'm going to quickly.
We were really. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. We were really. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to throw in the Epstein files. I know that gets kicked around, and as far as world problems, it might be way down there, but that was another horrific thing that we've got going on, and nobody's really paid maybe a couple people, but that was my point and I see this administration, I'll say it, evil enough to do something like this to distract from not only that, but from everything else that's going on.
We have a whole bunch of distractions. So we can distract away from the war with the Epstein and then distract to something else.
Right.
Yeah, we have enough.
Right.
And I wanted to bring that point up.
Go ahead.
And thank you for being here, Representative. I just wanted to point out that I see all of this to be a gigantic distraction for the American people. We're all looking in different directions and ping-ponging between issues and what's going on. The war is a horrific thing. And you might guess that since I'm running for a House seat in our Oregon House, I might be concerned what's going on in our state and how this war is going to affect us. I, as a candidate right now, and I'm a grassroots candidate, so my constituents help me with small dollar donations, but I'm looking at $5 gasoline in Port Orford. For me to gas up to crisscross Douglas County to the California border and all the way up to Allegheny in Coos County is my district area, is a lot of driving for me to get out. It's really going to affect me personally as a candidate, but I see it affecting my constituents. People are not wanting to get out and travel. They're concerned about what that cost is going to be for them moving into the future. And my question for you then is, what can we watch for, and how can we here at home in Oregon make our dollar stretch a little further, and what protections can you see from the U.S. congressional side that could be helpful for us here in Oregon at home?
Well, first of all, I'll go back to the Epstein file. And I think, Rick, you said, well, not as important. I'm sorry, but when did we get to the place where adults that rape children aren't held accountable? This should be bipartisan. I don't care whose name is in there.
I don't either.
And I have looked, Donald Trump said, and Pam Bondi said they would release the Epstein files, and we've gotten nothing but obfuscation. I'll tell you what, I went in to look at the files. You can sit there for 2 hours in a room where they're watching you. You have to log in so they can track what you look up. They don't give you any direction at all. Everything is just numbered, and you have to click on each thing. You can do a search, but it is really, really, they have put so many obstacles in place. But what is clear is that children were raped, period. And that should be something we all agree should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Democrat, Republican, and I don't care. And so as we're narrowing in on that, all of a sudden this war starts, right? Who knows? I can't speak to the motives of the president, but what I can say is that now these gas prices are really high. And quite frankly, for people in rural communities where it's not like you can just ride your bike from Port Orford up to Coos Bay, for people who are trying to get to work, I mean, this is really a major part of their paycheck. So we're looking at what we can do. It's rather difficult, but the most important thing we could do is get our troops out of Iran, out of the Middle East, and certainly boots on the ground out of the Middle East, and figure out how to solve this situation so that we can get trade happening again. But my concern is that I don't know. My grandmother always used to say, "Burnt bridges are much harder to walk across." We have burned so many relationships that people do not trust us, and killing the Ayatollah Khomeini, right? The people who have taken his place are even more radical.
Well,
So Brett, when you say how do we stretch dollars, I don't know, but we got to figure it out, and we have to. Yeah, we have to rely on our community for food, fuel, and fiber, and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well as possible. That's you know,
Thanks for
I'm a
thanks
little
for
bit of
answering that
a
question, because that a big thing that comes to mind for me is that I believe it's $300 million from the state budget. Oregon state budget has been disappeared in the whole federal removal of money for our state in the very early days of the
that's
Trump administration. How are we going to
yes,
fill that gap here in our state? When I have people that are concerned in Curry County don't want to pay a levy so that we have a sheriff's department that's operating properly. People don't want to, they're concerned about paying a 6-cent increase in the gas tax because that's going to be hard for them to do. But we have this $300 million gap. How are we going to close that for our health care and our education, making sure our kids are taken care of, and transportation? That's going to impact our economy here locally in Brookings and Curry County and the state of Oregon in ways I don't think any of us can see right now. And that's what I really want to try and get folks to pay attention to.
I I think that's true. Although I will say, so it's like the cognitive dissonance to both speak out against what I see is us careening toward, you know, an authoritarian regime, and speaking out against unconstitutional things that are happening, while also doing the job and representing the district. So we have been able to get funding for infrastructure, for community projects, for water, sewer, um, for the hospital. If we're able to get our lands bill through, I've introduced the Southwest Oregon Watershed and Salmon Protection Act, mm, and the Smith River National Recreational Area Expansion Act. Those are going to be included if we can get a lands package through, um, and that's really really important. For protecting the water of, Southern Oregon and Northern California. So there are things that we're getting done, not as much as we should. The administration is being, of course, when Democrats are in control, Republicans are in control, they can write the rules. But this is the only president in my lifetime that has openly said today, last night or today, it's so hard to know what was said when, but in the last 24 hours, the
24/7.
president, yeah, right. While he was up at night, posting on whatever social, he said that Democrats are the enemy. Like he compared us to Iran. We represent people. We're elected members of a congressional body, and this president has basically said we are the enemies of the state. We're the enemies of the state because we're calling out the fact that unconstitutional things are happening. This should be something that everyone, no matter what party they're in, should call out as wrong. Me speaking out in disagreement to someone on the other side of the aisle, to a Republican, doesn't make me an enemy of the state. But when that language is used by a president, it is a serious escalation. We're now going to see ICE in our airport, right? And
yeah.
they're not just going to be operating at TSA. That means checking IDs of anyone coming to the airport, right?
While they're holding an AR-16 in there, yeah, they're going to be there with their weapons drawn while they're checking your ID.
Right. So I think those things are really they're very dangerous, and we as Americans should stand up, whatever party we're in, and take back the checks and balances that we as Americans are provided by in our Constitution, and it makes us stronger when we work together on things that we can agree on. But even if we can't disagree, we can't agree. I shouldn't be called by the president an enemy of the state because I'm saying, hey, I think pedophiles should be prosecuted and we shouldn't be at war blowing up our budget or in murdering, having our people murdered. I mean, that seems pretty basic.
It's nuts. I'll say I consider you a patriot for speaking out against that. So
Yes.
thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
I want to circle around a little, if I may, Representative. And I noticed in your press releases early in February that you had secured over $16.6 million for 15 different local
right.
community projects. I think you touched on a couple of them a minute ago, but I was just wondering if you might give us a quick idea of what some of those are. If you can remember that far back, because there's been so much going on.
Yeah.
There's been so much gone on, and we're actually coming up on another round of community project funding. But one that I was most proud of was in Curry County at the Cancer Treatment Center. We had people in Curry County that were having to go up to Eugene and drive back in all kinds of weather. That's like, what is that, 7.5 hours round trip, right?
Yep.
At best. And while you're getting chemo, while you're sick, while you have cancer. And so getting money for that cancer treatment center was really important. Also, we've gotten money for dredging the ports. The district, as it was redistricted, was made into a coastal district, right? It used to have 3 congressional representatives representing the coast. So now I represent 2/3. Suzanne Bonamici represents 1/3. So I'm able to focus on coastal issues, whether that's dredging of ports, commercial fishing, tourism, housing, and the fact that as we don't have a sales tax, we have tourists that come in and they don't pay towards water and sewer and those other kinds of things. We have the travel and lodging tax, and that's one thing. But we've been able to get those kind of infrastructure projects funded.
So if I may point out,
so there's a whole lot of them.
in Curry
Yeah.
County, Representative, that you brought, I think it was a little over $1 million to Curry County to improve our county jail, which has been needed for a really long time. And I don't know if that's a drop in the bucket or if it's going to be a good part of the bucket, but thank you for doing that. And also there was $1 million brought for us to have work on replacing aging water infrastructure here in Brookings along Easy Street, I believe it is. So these are dollars that come directly to our communities and our county here in Oregon. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it greatly.
Well, we do have an issue with the Curry County Jail, right? And that is we got money for upgrading it, but if they upgrade it with the money they have, then it has to be built, and it needs it. There's no one that disagrees. It has to be then built completely up to code, which is a much more expensive proposition, and we don't have the money to do that. So this catch-22 of we want to have improvements and need the ability to make these improvements, in a staged piecemeal way. And I'm trying to work with the state to figure out how we get that done because it's so desperately needed.
So for anybody out there, questions or comments, remember, you can text in here, 541-661-4098. Congresswoman, I tell you, my head's spinning with all the stuff that we're talking about. It's very important. So I want to go back. Well, first of all, about the travel, you talked about that for a lot of us here. Now, again, yes, I'm in California, but I go to Grants Pass and Eureka and Coos Bay sometimes for medical. And right now, a lot of people go to Grants Pass in Medford, and they're going to start having 4-hour delays on 199, which could just
When is that, sorry?
I think in early May or late April.
How long is it going to last?
For a few weeks. So now again,
It's not only driving to these places; it's getting the appointments to go there. I have a urologist appointment in August. Believe it or not.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and Congresswoman, your district, would the whole district be considered rural? I'm guessing, or
No, well, I have Eugene, Springfield, Val.
say okay.
So like all of Blaine County. So there's some urban areas like Lincoln, Kitty, Newport, Coos Bay, everyone like in all those counties. So I have some urban, but all those are massive, predominantly rural.
If I may, all of those urban areas have a lot of rural attached to them.
That's where I was thinking too. Yeah.
Every single one of my counties has rural.
Oh yeah.
It has significant rural areas, and that's why, I feel very lucky, and I think we would do much better if more districts were mixed, where you can't get elected with just one party or another. And this is what's wrong with our democracy. First of all, Citizens United, money in politics, where people can buy elections with dark money, and then also the gerrymandering, where we have very few swing districts anymore. And that means that people we're electing the most extreme of each party, and that's not helpful. I think we should redo our election system. I believe we should be in a multi-party. I think a multi-party coalition government would be better. But right now, we have a president that doesn't even want to work with half of the people that have been elected in Congress. So we have bigger issues right now.
Do you see any?
And he's trying to elect his own voters. Essentially, we're voting in reverse. So he wants to pick out his voters, and that's all that's going to vote.
And that's the huge about elections. Let's, if we can, delve it into a little bit. Generally the Republicans disdain for mail-in voting. I've never understood that.
Let me grab that,
please. And the other part is it's fraudulent. As far as I can see, and I'm no expert, but there's not enough voter fraud to really make mail-in voting an issue. That's kind of how I see it, Congresswoman.
Well, all you have to do is shout, "It's filled with fraud, filled with fraud, filled with fraud." And you say it enough times. And it's true.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a decades-long effort to undermine voter integrity, right? Like, and people voting, but people's belief in the system. And so a lot of misinformation has gone out. The amount of voter fraud is so small, and you have to understand that, when someone signs something, right, to say, yes, I am a citizen and I am eligible to vote. By doing that, they're certifying, right, under penalty of a felony prosecution, that they are eligible to vote. And I think voter fraud should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
For sure.
But it is very, very small. And I'll tell you what about, vote by mail. That was promoted by Norma Paulus, who was a Republican Secretary of State. Our last Republican Secretary of State, Dennis Richardson, nobody would call him liberal or even moderate, but he was very clear. Our vote by mail system is safe. Now, let me tell you what would happen if, they canceled vote by mail, especially in our rural communities, right? Yeah. That would mean people would have to take off a day from work, that they would have to drive to a polling place.
$5
a gallon. Get $5 a gallon. In our rural and frontier counties, that's a major problem. And then, Yeah, it basically, we would have to set up an entirely new system before our November election. And so vote by mail with our voters pamphlet where everybody gets to put 325 words in. I bring in voters pamphlets to show my colleagues and they're like, every voter gets this? I'm like, absolutely. I mean, that evens out access to voter information. But vote by mail is the safest way to vote, and you have a paper copy. Senator Wyden and I have sponsored a national vote by mail bill so that every state could do this because it is the safest, most secure means to vote. But what we have now is what the Republicans call the SAVE Act. I call the STEAL Act because stealing our act.
Yeah, glad you're balancing on that. Yes.
Places like Florida,
Yeah,
you have to stand online for 3 hours to vote. That's unbelievable.
Impressive.
So there's been this data showing that 82% of Americans, support the SAVE Act. No, 82% of Americans support some kind of voter identification. That, in theory. But when you go down and in this same poll, you go down and say, would you, if you're a married woman, do you have a passport? You have to bring your birth certificate and your marriage certificate. And you have to go to, and again, this affects our rural and frontier counties the most. You would have to go to your elections office, right? Driving at $5, $6, $7 a gallon to show them all of these IDs, or get a passport for $180 that will take, I don't know how long, because the Doge Bros fired a whole bunch of people that processed that. I mean, this will stop people from voting, and I don't think people understand how much it will affect our rural and frontier counties, even more so than our urban areas. Like, most people in this district do not have a passport. I have my Real ID license. It's not valid. And people don't understand that your license is not something that's valid. That, it takes time to go back and get, your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, because I changed my name when I got married. So there's 900,000 Oregon women who got married and changed their last name that would be kicked off the voter rolls. There are elderly Americans without birth certificates. There was, I think 2 years ago in Ohio, there was a nun. She was, almost 90 years old. She didn't have her birth certificate. She was not allowed to vote, and she's been voting. She was a nun, for goodness sake, from McNamer, who lived in the convent.
Right.
This is crazy. So Oregon's elections are secure. We also have seen an attack on the U.S. Postal Service. I have talked to postal workers, and they are being told that they can't work overtime, even though jobs have been cut. They're very understaffed, and that they should just leave the mail there. Postmarking things, the delaying the postmark is specifically focused on attacking vote by mail so that your postmark is later. And when the postmark is later, that means your vote doesn't get counted. So this administration is specifically slowing down our mail to affect vote by mail. How, that's just evil.
It's
That is a constitutional right. It is a constitutional right to make our voices heard. But as we have seen in Georgia, we have seen in Texas, where more Democrats came out to vote than Republicans, we are seeing everywhere that voters are not voting they're not happy with the Trump administration. So instead of owning that and having some checks and balances and free and fair elections and earning Americans' votes, what they want to do is stop us from being able to vote. This is a constitutional right that we should fight for.
Boy, howdy. We have a text. I want to get this text in that we just got, and thank you for the text. It says, it is unfortunate that the battle over the budget has simplistically been branded as either funding ICE or the TSA employees. The anti-administration stance could be stressing instead that we are fighting to eliminate the uncertainty and fear that all Americans are living with. And this texter says, they know a person here in Brookings who looks like he could be of the wrong ancestry, and so he carries his passport with him at all times. I don't have a passport either. In case ICE should appear in our streets, the fear is everywhere.
I know a woman that does. I know a woman that does the same thing.
Well, it's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
So thank you for that text.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. We are seeing Americans that happen to look like immigrants, right? American citizens that are being picked up and sometimes detained, right? Just because they look like they might be an immigrant. So they have brown skin. We're seeing immigrants who are here legally, right? Who are here legally, whether they're DACA recipients or they're refugees, they have legal status. They are following the rules. They are being detained. We have a man who comes from Ethiopia. They're literally, he is a deacon in his church. He worked and earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD here in the United States. They have 4 children and a wife who are American citizens. And they are they're not only planning to deport him over a paperwork error, but because they can't get paperwork from Ethiopia, they're like sending to a third country where he doesn't speak the language, where he doesn't have family, I mean, I went to see him and he just cried. And he's like, my wife just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. I want to be with my children and my family. And can you please help me? Look, that's not what people voted for. You want to support people who committed crime? Absolutely. Oh, agree. That's not what's happening here.
If this guy was an Afrikaner escaping what Trump calls gang violence, then he would be welcomed with open arms. But if he'd come from one of the Central American countries claiming the same thing, he would not be. The Afrikaners
my husband's British, right? My husband became a citizen in 2016. I want to be clear, he had his green card before he met me, but he has never been stopped. No one ever asked him if he is here legally. No one, we don't care a bit because he's a big white guy. It's about race and racism,
Well, yeah, but I think that I'll just say it, in my opinion, racism, misogyny, and a bunch of other stuff that I can't think of is part of this administration.
How when he's taking all the references to slavery and black problems out of the Smithsonian, changing names of forts back to Civil War generals, just do an incredible amount of racist things. I just read this morning that there's national parks around the country where they're taking down a lot of the signs that give our country a bad name.
So I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure and Natural Resources Committees. I'm the highest ranking Democrat on the Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries Subcommittee because, with 250 miles of ocean and all the rivers, streams, like forests and other natural resource issues, these are 2 really important committees for the district. But we had a committee hearing, and I don't normally lose my temper, but a colleague of mine from North Carolina said, after Jim Clyburn spoke and said, how can you erase my history, erase the fact that slavery ever happened, erase what the Tuskegee Airmen did, erase all of the things that happened, the Trail of Tears. This is part of our history. And my colleague, Republican from North Carolina, said, Democrat, I don't know, you started talking about Joe Biden in an auto pen. That was below a creative group. And then he said, Democrats want to just show how bad America is and only focus on the negative. And we need to show how far we've come. So I popped in and said, and this was all about going to our federal parks and the Smithsonian and our national parks and erasing anything that is negative and that does not fit into a history that is basically white supremacist. And I said, how the hell can we tell how far we have come if we don't know where we've been? I mean, we can tell how far we've come because we look at history. We look at what happened in Nazi Germany. We look at what happened on the Trail of Tears. We look at what happened with, the civil rights marches so that,
Not if we get to rewrite
Black
all the
Americans
textbooks.
could vote.
Right.
That's it. And that's the issue. Why are we afraid? Why would they be afraid to talk about our history? As Winston Churchill would say, warts and all.
Warts and
That's
all.
what your tree should be. Yeah.
And they don't seem to understand. We've done a lot of good stuff, this country, a lot of good stuff, a lot of great people, but I can not say it any better than warts at all. We all know what's happened, and we need to know that history to hopefully not live through it again, but we're living through some of that stuff again.
Yeah.
I think about the saying after the Holocaust, never again. That was battered, well, not battered around, but it has happened again. Stuff like that has happened.
If you don't understand the history, you don't understand what's going on now.
Thank you.
A perfect example is looking at Hitler's march across Europe and going into Czechoslovakia. I'm just going to take this little bit here that's actually German anyway, and then he just kept on walking.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely what would happen in Ukraine.
And it's, scary.
Can I add to the representative's point? Sorry, before I cut you off, Representative. But I think it's really important.
No, go ahead.
Important for us to be able to measure our progress. We can't pick up the measuring stick as we walk past. If we're going to measure our progress, there has to be some point of reference, and the attempt is to remove the points of reference, so there's no way to measure our progress. I think it's really important that we lay that stick down and keep track of where even the negative points are. So thanks for letting me interrupt.
Yes, bigly. Let me say that. And Congresswoman, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to back to where we were talking about Trump and claiming the Democrats are the enemy, and that's where they're at. This is a little snippet of where I think I believe he's a truly evil man. My opinion only. His comment about Robert Mueller passing. Now, granted, they weren't the best of friends, but I thought that was pretty hideous.
I didn't hear what he said.
Oh, he said he was glad he's dead.
Oh, I knew that part.
Glad he's dead. Now, I just thought that was quite the horrific comment to make, but it didn't surprise me coming from him. That's what I'll say about it.
No, and if you look at the difference between the outrage over people who said negative negative things about Charlie Kirk, right?
Oh boy,
and yet the president of the United States is supposed to be someone who holds himself above reproach, who is supposed to be someone that the people of this country look up to. And yet he is he just says terrible things about people, and we should expect more. Now, I'll go back to history. Knowing history is important. For instance, in Iran, certainly you had the Ayatollah Khomeini, right?
Yeah.
They overthrew the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran was put in by the United States because the previous leader of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, he was democratically elected, very popular, and he wanted to audit BP, right, for their oil company.
Yes, British Petroleum.
We, with the oil company, again, wars for oil, put in the Shah of Iran, who was also a brutal dictator, right? He just wasn't a religious fanatic. So we did that, did not go well. The Ayatollah came in. They support Hezbollah. They they are a danger to the entire Middle East. They are a pariah nation, but we have to understand how we got there so that we don't end up doing it again. And that's why we need to have conversations in Congress before going into war so that we get to have transparency and talk about what this history is and relay the vast majority of my constituents' will, Democrats and Republicans, is that we don't end up in another foreign war for oil that puts Americans in danger.
Which is where we are right now.
And I'm glad you brought that point up, Representative. I think a lot of us forget about the fact that we're a representative democracy. You represent all of us that live in Oregon Congressional District 4. You are our voice in that house. So if you don't get to speak about it because President Trump has just skipped Congress, how do we ever have our voice heard by our president about how we feel about this war? Because you're representing us there. And I'll let you have it.
And I'm more and there's those points, Brett, you are exactly correct. And the larger point is there are presidents that have tried to exceed their executive power, right? But like Lyndon Johnson wanted both, he knew how to use his power both as president and in the Senate. But you had a judiciary and a Congress that balanced him out. You had Richard Nixon, where you had Republicans that actually came out and said, we need to hold our president accountable. And Democrats and Republicans came together over Watergate, to get over something he did wrong.
Nixon was not a cult leader, though. That's what we have now. People who will back in regardless of what he does.
Right. And it's our job as members of Congress, and I tell this to my Republican colleagues, Mike Johnson does not want to buck the president. He is loyal to the president as opposed to being loyal to the American people.
If you watched him during the president's speech to the joint members, I can't think of the name right now, and Mike Johnson sitting there with that silly grin on his face, he looked like Alfred E. Newman. And he always does when he's standing next to the president. The joke that I don't think a lot of people got is Trump bought all these shoes for all his cabinet members, and the shoes that he bought for Marco Rubio were way too big for Marco Rubio. I think it was trying to. A lot of people thought he just got the size wrong. No, he's trying to tell Marco, you're filling some pretty big.
Well, Marco is filling shoes that are way too big.
Yes, he is. I think little Marco was probably a good description.
Well,
this,
yeah.
Again, what we need is to have a healthy democracy. We need to get money out of politics, right, and overturn Citizens United. We need to stop the overt partisan gerrymandering and have the Supreme Court do their job. I'm really concerned that they are going to overturn the Voting Rights Act, right, in Article 2. And that will mean that there could be much more severe gerrymandering of like 19 more seats, which is not healthy for our democracy. We need to, I think, expand vote by mail so that people can have time to vote and have their voices heard. And I also think at some point, I would like to see us have more than two parties. But right now, we have a president and a Speaker of the House and an administration that wants to just have one party having a voice. And that one party isn't working on behalf of the vast majority of Americans. And we have to fight back and make sure in 2026 our voices are heard and we have free and fair elections.
Very true. Now we are running down. We got about a little over 3 minutes. I'm going to throw out hopefully some hope. Congresswoman, what do you think, hope, for the midterms? I get a little nervous when I hear a lot of people saying, oh, it's going to be an easy blue wave. I don't know about that, but we are hoping for some midterm luck. What would you call it? I don't know.
We all hard work. That is not luck. It's all hard work.
Well, for sure.
We all thought Kamala had a walk in the park.
Yeah, let's hear from the representative on that.
Yes. So, first of all, what we have seen in all of the elections across the country is that, that elections are swinging by double digits. Again, Texas is a good example. Georgia is an excellent example. So those Jersey, right? So and Virginia. So those are good signs. We have to make sure that we fight voter suppression and hold firm on not letting the Senate pass the Steal Act, the Stealing Our Votes Act. And then Democrats need to give people something to vote for. It is not enough to just say Trump is bad. We have to give them something to vote for and work harder and actually have messaging that speaks to working class people and ordinary people. We can't just show up to people that can't pay for their rent or their gas or their food with a 16-page paper on poverty. That's not going to fly. We have to do better at meeting people where they are and fighting for some economic prosperity and balance in people's lives.
Well, again, we're all hoping, and I don't know about praying. I don't pray, but hoping for the midterm.
I'm working.
Swing.
I don't know about you. I'm working for it.
And again, Congresswoman Val Hoyle, really appreciate you doing the show. Sorry for the initial. We had some tech issues that I certainly cannot repair, but it worked out. Got a little late start, but again, like to really thank you for being on our show, and I hope to have you on again. I've got pages of notes I didn't get to, and maybe the next time. And we really appreciate you being on.
Thanks very much. I appreciate what you're doing. Local media matters. And I want to, call out Brett Cecil for the work that he's done to organize in Curry County. He is working nonstop. And Brett, we appreciate you.
And we do. I as well.
All right. We're just about done. I want a quick shout out to our friends, John and Janine, who showed up here. Before we started the show, they walked in off the street, saw the radio station, came in and bought a t-shirt. Yay. Thank you, John and Janine. All right. Thank you all for listening. KCIW 100.7 FM here in beautiful Brookings, Oregon.